Hey, before we get started, I just wanted to let you know that there is some colorful language in this episode. Thanks.
A time-lapse video of it printing in time-lapse a bust of Beethoven. And as soon as I saw that, it was just kind of a light bulb moment of going, holy shit. Like, I do digital design stuff all the time anyways with web development design. I did motion graphics. And it was just kind of a natural thing to click in my head to say, if I can design something and create something practically out of nothing, that's completely revolutionary.
Hello there, Internet, and welcome to the 3D Print Authority podcast. This is a place where we come together to have a transparent and no BS conversation about the world of 3D printing and technology. My name is Adam Fosnot. I'm a mechanical engineer, and I have been fascinated by 3D printing for as long as I can remember. Let's get started. Thank you so much for joining me and taking the time out of your busy day for this interview. And we're going to spend pretty much the next 45 minutes to an hour just talking 3D printing. But before we get there, I'd invite you just to introduce yourself and share something outside of 3D printing about yourself.
Got it. My name is Moceri. I'm the founder and CEO of MakerOS. And right now you can see by this crazy background, I'm in one of the most iconic former training facilities for the automotive industry out of Detroit, and born and raised down here, family of makers. My whole life has been a maker, and fell into 3D printing in 2010, and it's been love ever since.
That's awesome. So we were talking before I started recording. We both grew up in the Midwest. And so I think we both have that passion for making things and manufacturing.
There's almost like a form of resilience too in saying that, right? Because we're in an industrial type of industry, right? Additive manufacturing. However, there's a post-industrial mindset and transformation that happened to Cleveland and Detroit. However, it's still industrial, but not as much as it used to in the 50s and 60s and such. But all of it that it has done has become more automated and much more advanced. And what a lot of people don't understand about Detroit in particular is that there are a lot of automated manufacturing micro facilities here, not just at a extremely large scale that you would see in like the Ford plant or at the Fiat Chrysler plants, where there's a lot of places. There's Fanuc. There's, what is this one? KUKA. Yeah, these are KUKA machines behind me. So a lot of headquarters in small like field offices from those types of machine makers are out here in Detroit. And it's actually called and nicknamed Automation Alley. Okay. And there's actually an organization called Automation Alley based out of Southeast Michigan too. That's kind of like an incubator, accelerator, connecting force for the manufacturing industry out here.
Gotcha. That's super cool. I know. I had an automotive internship when I was still in school.
Nice.
So I'm really familiar with kind of the level of manufacturing that actually happens in Detroit.
Right.
That I think gets overlooked a lot of times.
I think so. I mean, what was really great in the movie Ford versus Ferrari, there's a scene where Ford goes up to Shelby in his office, and he goes and looks out of his window looking down at the River Rouge plant. It's just absolutely massive manufacturing plant. And he goes and he looks at Shelby, of the Shelby car brand, and he goes, "Do you think Roosevelt won World War II on it by his own?" And the camera pans over to the manufacturing facility. And what they called Detroit was the arsenal of democracy, which very much so was. That's where a lot of the planes, the tanks, and everything were made. And there is still a military installation here, military manufacturing kind of space called TACOM. And that's where a lot of the advanced tank and armory type stuff was manufactured and continued till to this day.
Gotcha. That is so cool.
There's so much history.
The arsenal of what?
The arsenal of democracy.
The arsenal of democracy. Man, that is so cool. And
it's kind of menacing. It's kind of menacing when you say it. However, quite literally without Detroit, we very well may not have been able to supply, not even just the Russians, but also the British with the whole, was it the Lend-Lease Act or whatever it was? So there is a lot of stuff that came out of this place that I think is completely underappreciated. And I think there is so much more that this place is just now starting to come back to itself.
Definitely. The heart of American manufacturing. You're standing in it. And I love to hear the passion for kind of the history and where you grew up. It's awesome. But today you're in the additive manufacturing space, what a lot of people see as kind of the next leg of real manufacturing, if you will. I think the buzzword that's thrown around all the time is Industry 4.0, right?
Yeah.
And so today you founded and are running MakerOS, which is a software product. How did that first get started?
Sure. So the career path was this, where it kind of actually goes back to 2010, even before the founding of MakerOS, where I was a freshman in college at DePaul University in Chicago. And, I had already been involved in building websites and web development at that time. So just by nature of that, up until 3 a.m. building a website or something. And I go on to Gizmodo or might have been Hacker News or something like that. And I saw an article that was posted about a 3D printer. I'm like, that sounds kind of cool. You click the link and all of a sudden it's a YouTube video of, it was the MakerBot cupcake, a time-lapse video of it printing in time-lapse a bust of Beethoven. And as soon as I saw that, it was just kind of a light bulb moment of going, holy shit, like I do digital design stuff all the time anyways with web development design. I did motion graphics. And it was just kind of a natural thing to click in my head to say, if I can design something and create something practically out of nothing, that's completely revolutionary. So I fell down that entire thought path of, okay, I want to build a business around this. So, fast forward a couple of years after, doing some smaller projects and, making money while doing 3D printing out of my apartment in Chicago, I basically teamed up with a few people and we started the world's first retail service bureau out of Chicago called 3DPX. So it was located right downtown off of Clark Street and the river. So right in the Reed Murdoch building for you people in Chicago and in River North. And that was a great example of having front retail space that got a lot of attention and a lot of newsworthiness where people would just walk in, see things, take photos, a lot of social media around that. But also we had a lot of articles and news pieces done about us. But the back of house is what was the real revenue generator of that business, which was the service side, where people would come in and by volume and having all that attention in the media, we would get blue chip companies coming to us asking us to do, contract work. Can you make a small batch of 10,000 of X and 40,000 of Y? And can you design Z to build a product for us? So we did all of that, the design, prototype, and in actual production of these parts. But in doing that business, this is 2013, we had to string together a whole bunch of different softwares to even make the business work, where we had to have our home, first spend all the money on a local server to host all of our files, have, a server license of whatever, the Microsoft server license. And then we had to have all the equipment, and we had to have all of, Magix, NetFab, QuickBooks, and Salesforce. In Salesforce. Oh my God. We spent so much money on that, especially on the Salesforce consultants and implementers, which would charge anywhere between $150 an hour for like an associate and like $250 plus for like a partner, whoever was, running that thing. So the hours ran up pretty quick because Salesforce does not come out turnkey for a small fabrication business for what our purpose was. Okay. So much customization, so much time wasted, so much money wasted. And I'm sitting there going, why the hell isn't there like something that exists specifically for this type of industry? I mean, the answer was no duh, because everything was so new, but we were experiencing in real time before a lot of other people in the industry basically the ceiling that you hit in scalability, where you either have to add more people or more machines in order to start making more money at that point. However, since in 2013, the age of apps and cloud computing was really kind of kicking off, I saw the opportunity to not only create something just for 3D printing, but for the industry as a whole. So what I did is I left that business and I moved to Detroit, back to Detroit where I'm from, and started another company called Manulith. And the whole purpose of Manulith was to serve the automotive, aerospace, and medical and the startup community in Detroit. But to get all of the revenue from those four revenue generating centers to self-fund and bootstrap the development of that software concept. So we used all of those funds to build basically a prototype of what would eventually become MakerOS for ourselves.
Okay.
And what we did is we built the platform to allow people to come to manulith.com to submit their files, to get quotes, to interact with an engineer within an online portal, to get that full experience that you would normally get with a Shapeways or a Xometry or a Protolabs, but in a fashion that was more approachable and more collaborative. Instead of just shooting a file into the ether and just getting an automatic quote, we understood that from our business model of who we were serving, medical, aerospace, automotive and such, they don't just want to send you a part. They actually want to talk to an engineer. They need to have explanation of, I want this part, but you need to be able to explain to them the best material and process and application of the processing material for their specific part. So that's why we designed the software initially like that. But then the time came where we proved the software enough that it was working for us, and the planned eventuality and the planned pivot of the business was to shift all the way to MakerOS. And that actually didn't happen until about 2018 when we ceased operations of Manulith, the kind of the self-funding. Even though we did get some venture capital to kind of build the prototype version of this, we then raised another small round to basically build our next generation and version of MakerOS. And that version was not specific just to additive, but it was to everything surrounding an operation that would incorporate additive as part of their tool belt, meaning all of the design types of projects, the engineering projects, CNC, laser cutting, stamping, painting, putting a puzzle together, whatever it is. All that matters is that if you make something for a customer, MakerOS can encapsulate all of those activities. And that is what we are selling today.
Gotcha. So many follow-up questions. Thank you for laying out such a nice kind of step-by-step history for us. If you look back at Manulith, that was a 3D printing service, but really the vision from the start was to build the software product. Is that right?
Yep.
Hey there, it's Adam. If you're enjoying this video, could you go ahead and tap the like button? It's totally free for you, and through the magic of internet algorithms, it will help more people see the podcast. Thanks.
Absolutely. Yeah, from day one. So when I left 3DPX in early 2014, I basically spent 3 months just business planning and designing what would eventually become I called it the system. And I originally, so here's a cool little backstory too. So I knew that I was going to start it out of Detroit. And I'm a huge nerd, and I love sci-fi. And there's this video game or this real sci-fi universe, Deus Ex.
Okay.
And there's one of the main companies in there is called Seraph Industries.
Okay.
And Seraph is based out of Detroit in this, sci-fi universe, and they make, robotic limbs and, bionics and stuff like that. Sure. So I originally called the company Project Seraph, code name.
Okay.
And then as I started thinking about it more, and because I'm even a bigger nerd than I realized, I love the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. And, part of the evolution of man in that movie is touching the monolith, and then the next evolution of mental thinking or physical evolution happens. So I wanted to call the business Monolith, not because of just the 3D printing services, but because this system was going to be such a monolithic structure that I saw in my vision within the industry, that if a business were to use it or to touch it, it would transcend them into the next version that they could be or what they wanted to be. So that was kind of the origins of that name. But then it eventually turned into Manulith because manu by hand, lith by stone, and one of the most iconic, because Detroit is a city of sculptures. Like, there's so many sculptures and statues here, but one of the most well-known one is the Joe Louis fist, the manulith.
Man, I love it. I love
but
all
also the logo for manulith too was in the exact proportions of the monolith in the movie. So
that is so cool.
And the M, so the M in manulith was design, prototype, and production. So those were the three pillars, which also transcended into, what MakerOS encapsulates, those types of activities.
Gotcha. That is so cool. I love the backstory and the movie tie-ins. I think it says so much about, you and what you're kind of setting out to accomplish.
Thank you.
More high level, what did you study in school? Where did you learn kind of all of this business planning aspects of it?
YouTube University.
Okay.
So I went to school at DePaul University, and I was studying, business management, focus in entrepreneurship. So they actually had an entrepreneurship program, and I was also doing a dual major in interactive media, so software development, visual design, UX, UI, all that type of good stuff. But I actually dropped out in 2012. So I was in the middle of my junior year when I dropped out, because I found that opportunity to start 3DPX with the other group of people that were starting it, and then I became a co-founder of that business. And then I was doing that full time, basically November, December of 2012, and then in 2013, 3DPX opened. But throughout that entire period of time of learning additive and learning just design for additive, and just the general business concepts around it, in 2010, I became aware of it in that story I told earlier. But then in right after the start of 2011, I actually bought a kit for a MakerBot Thing-O-Matic.
Okay.
And I knew at that time, you used to have to solder all the parts together. They gave you blank boards for a lot of the things. And I knew nothing about how to solder or anything. But this one guy on YouTube, and thank God he had a whole series on this. It was called the EEE blog. I think he's Australian, or forgive me, or if he's from New Zealand. But he's like the nicest dude in like electrical engineer on YouTube. He's just super interesting. Had great explainers.
That's quite a compliment.
Yeah. No, seriously, like I learned so much from that guy. I should probably write him something. But there were a lot of videos like that, and the most active forum at the time was the RepRap forum and the MakerBot forum, and I was all over that. So it was strange. Like, I was 19 years old, and here I am, like, messaging back and forth, like, engineers that are innovating on this tech, and I'm asking them direct questions. And I've even had, a few phone calls with them. And in particular, one of the most revolutionary things that happened, I think, to RepRaps and for, MakerBots, or any 3D printers that are not industrial, Stratasys machines, was just the advent of the firmware and the new boards that were coming out, specifically acceleration profiles, and the ability to really fine-tune those made printing so much faster. Because back in the day, before Sailfish firmware for MakerOS, or before Marlin, it was just like...
Yes.
It's like super janky. Your machine would shake to death. And I had many sleepless nights because I would run my machine at night sometimes, and just the lash of everything and just the resonance of the machine without acceleration was just unbearable. But my point is that I was involved in testing a lot of the beta software for the Sailfish software. And I had direct access to, it wasn't Dan Newman, it was Jetty himself. I can't believe I forgot his name. And I remember talking to him, and he gave me like pre-release version of the software. And when the Replicator 1 came out too, put it on my machine. And, oh my God, it was like a completely different experience. But I knew in that time that I was learning from the greats, from these extremely experienced engineers. And I think that's just generally the power of community, the power of the rep community, which I owe a lot of my knowledge to, but also just how new the technology was in appreciating it for what it was at the time that this was all happening, like 2011, 2012 time. And that was an education that no university in, like there were quite literally maybe only a handful of maybe 5 people that could have really taught you that type of stuff at that period of time. And I had direct access to them on a forum.
Yeah.
And that was just unreal. That was so cool.
I couldn't agree more. When I think back to 2010 and the MakerBot Cupcake and the Thing-O-Matic, that was when I look at innovation curves. That was the trigger. The expiration of Stratus's patents and then the open source nature of it became the trigger that caused the 2010 to 2016 boom in 3D printing.
Right.
Before kind of it became a lot more easy to understand, a lot better polished for, an average user when you look at kind of where we are today.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of those early guys get enough credit for what they did, actually.
Yeah.
Like Adrian Boyer, Rep Foundation, he's, fairly active on Twitter, but, I don't think enough people talk about his influence, right?
Yeah.
On like the early stages of doing a lot of this stuff. And, even some of the earlier companies, some of them have, started and fizzled in popularity. There's a few that come to mind that probably come to your mind too. I don't want to offend anybody, but just still the work that those guys did in the early 2010s, even like 2008, 2009, when some of these earlier rep prototypes were starting, like that laid the foundation for where we are today. And, even before that, we had 20 years of additive innovation. However, that was all locked behind, hundreds of thousands of dollars to access one, but also, all the patents.
Absolutely. So when you look at, if you rewind and try to think back, it seems like such a big leap for me. It's for you to go from being in school, becoming aware of this technology, running printing services in your apartment or dorm room. I did the same thing when I was in school, so I love that we have that in common.
Yeah.
I was running 2 3D printers in a room no bigger than this, 3-bedroom apartment. Do you have a question about 3D printing? If so, I would love to answer it. Feel free to leave any questions in the comments down below, or go to 3dprintauthority.com/forums to submit your question. Thanks. I had a Zone Star acrylic i3 frame.
Oh, man.
I split it with one of my fraternity brothers and one of my roommates at the time because I had no money.
Right.
So I was like, look, I really, really want one. And I had started a makerspace in school. This is a huge diversion from what we were talking about.
No, I love it. Keep going. This is awesome.
We'll get back to MakerOS. But so I put like $100 in. He put $100 in. The deal was like, I'll print you anything you want. And then I signed up for 3D Hubs. Had that machine paid for itself within 6 months. Bought another machine, and then never slept because they would just be buzzing all night.
Did you ever have like the shell shock? I described it as almost shell shock syndrome of printing in your bedroom, where with the earlier machines, I mean, you had acrylic machines, so they probably resonated quite a bit. But I had, laser cut. It was a birchwood that the old MakerBots were made out of, something like that. So the resonance of those machines as the motors chirped and as like the stepper motors were running, like would just like just like loud buzzing, and like I would hear those noises after I'd wake up, and it was almost like a form of psychosis almost. It's just like because I would print so much, and I joke too. I used to print a lot of ABS back then. In an enclosed machines. So, I'm doing okay.
Permanent brain damage in some way. Maybe. I hope it doesn't catch up to you.
Well, here's another quick diversion. We'll go back to your story. So, we at 3DPX actually did the first nanoparticle emissions test on 3D printers.
No way.
And that was that study that came out in 2013 that scared the shit out of a lot of people. And there was several articles even that ran on, it might have been Gizmodo or Ars Technica or something like that.
Sure.
And titles like, "Is your 3D printer killing you?" And different titles like that, and all these health harm effects of that. But the only thing that we did in that first study, and this was with with IIT in Chicago.
Okay.
And we basically set up my machines in a controlled room, and we were printing in ABS, and it was a no duh that more nanoparticles were being emitted from printing with ABS, partially because of the nature of the chemical composition of ABS and what it emits, but also with the heated bed, it heat rises and more of that stuff's going to get out into the environment. But we said nothing in that study of the actual particulars of what was being emitted. So a lot of it was taken out of context of that study, and that's just my first lesson in, well, other than the whole gun thing, was the whole how media can take a technology and just completely misunderstand it and misrepresent it, and just if it bleeds, it leads type of thing.
Yeah.
But by going back to your story, printing in a small room, all the noises and all the smells. So you're igniting a lot of these memories for myself of what you were doing.
That's great. You mentioned shell shock. I still have that now. Where I'll be running the machine behind me, or I've got two to my right. Mm-hmm. We'll be downstairs in the living room watching TV, and I'll just start. I start to hear click 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 of an extruder or a hot end jamming, and I'll have a sudden moment of panic.
Oh, God. And the thing is if you are a good enough machine operator, if you know your machine well enough, just by the sound of what it's doing, not even just the click of the stepper motor skipping, but you know exactly what it's doing.
Yep.
Basically. So if it's doing circular paths or straight lines or whatever, you can almost have an intuition of knowing what it's actually doing just by sound, and it kind of can almost turn into a form of synesthesia of I don't know if that's the right way to describe it, but just by knowing the sound, you can build a shape in your brain of knowing what it's doing.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm all right, I know what infill sounds like. I know what outer shells sound like. I know when the fan kicks in on an overhang. I can imagine the model that it's working on. I've never thought about it in that way. Such a cool comparison, though. Anyway, I want to get back to MakerOS.
If you can't tell, I love talking about all these things.
Yeah, that was a fun diversion for sure. So now we're in Detroit. You've started Monolith, which is just a cover for the real vision of wanting to create the ultimate manufacturing software. And when you started Monolith, was that VC funded? Can we dive into some of the VC aspects of it?
Sure. Yeah. So when we started Monolith, it was just me.
Okay.
And I had a lot of the equipment that I had in Chicago, I brought over to Detroit. And I had a couple of friends that helped me kind of start some of the operations, but it was me that was running the whole day-to-day and everything else, all the jobs and things like that.
Okay.
And we started out of this incubator called Techtown Detroit, which I can't speak highly enough about. If you're in the Midwest, if you're in Michigan, if you're in Detroit, you need to know about Techtown Detroit if you're looking to start a tech startup. There's other incubators, but Techtown actually has a lot of the state and federal connections, along with a university connection, Wayne State University. And I recognized that immediately because when I was in Chicago, I saw the importance of this other incubator called 1871, which is kind of operated similarly. But Techtown Detroit was just such a no pun intended, monolithic structure in the startup scene and small business community back in 2014. And this was just the start of when the state of Michigan and Detroit were doing a lot of big ad campaigns of like Detroit coming out of, the 2009 recession and everything else. So they're going through a big rebranding. So they wanted everything and anything to do with startups and that type of energy. So we were very much a part of that in media and in doing a lot of talks and things like that. But when we started the company, it was completely self-funded.
Okay.
All the revenue that was generated from all the sales of custom parts and doing design work went back into the business in order to grow it. And It was like a step-by-step process where I was lucky to have machines first, and I had a stockpile of material. So I didn't have any initial upfront cost in order to start it, because that money was spent on buying that equipment back, a couple of years before. So I'm in that space, printing stuff for people, built a website, and I did list myself on 3D Hubs. But the interesting thing is that I got way more business through the website than I did through 3D Hubs. Okay. And I have my own opinions about 3D Hubs back in the day, which is maybe saved for a different time, or we'll get into it later.
Certainly.
However, what I realize is that people want to deal with the business. They don't want to deal with the middleman. And that started to reinforce more of the idea that the software is going to be the key that unlocks not just my service business in order to grow and self-fund even further, but the industry as a whole, not just additive, but small manufacturers. Mm-hmm. So the VC funding came in once we proved that the software was working for us, that we had volume of sales, and we proved that we had KPIs showing that people were actually using it and submitting jobs through it. And ideally, what you want to do and show to an investor in a very early seed stage is that your concept is not only just an idea, but there's a prototype of it, and that you have data to support that it is replicatable and reproducible in other environments. So then when we got that initial pre-seed round of funding, we basically were able then to take what we had that was just built for us. We had to rewrite the whole thing because it was a singular instance, but then we had to build a whole new infrastructure, hire a whole bunch of developer contractors in order to go and create really the beta 1.0 version of the system, where we could actually bring on other folks onto the system without having to spin up new servers and stuff like that. So basically what it's called is just a multi-tenant system. So that was what that first round of funding was for. In going through that initial funding and just learning how to do it was significantly helped by Techtown Detroit in terms of being able to build connections, going to a lot of events that they sponsored, and simply the guidance of a lot of the mentors that I got out of there. If it sucks for people now starting a business, mainly because there's no physical presence that you can have with the community. And sure, there's online communities, but there's nothing like going into a co-working space with somebody else that's working on an adjacent type of product within your own industry, and shooting the shit with them and building a connection. Say, I met this investor down the street. He's looking for this. Maybe you should go meet with them. Here's an intro. Or sometimes you would just run into VCs that were just in the building, and they would see my printers, and they'd be like, that's cool. And then you just strike a conversation. And at first you have no idea that they're a VC until they hand you your card. And then you're like, oh my God, I was just speaking to a VC. I'm looking for money right now. And then you get the meeting, and then that's really how a lot of that snowballed. So I highly recommend anybody getting involved with an incubator space that is very community oriented, that's publicly accessible if that's possible. So
gotcha. Definitely a little bit more difficult in the current pandemic age, but
yes,
regardless, a great recommendation, I think, for anyone looking into startups. You keep saying equipment. At the time, I'm just imagining that you weren't able to really serve automotive, aerospace, medical with MakerBots. What equipment were you running? Do you want to be a guest on this podcast? If so, go to 3dprintauthority.com/forms to apply. Thanks.
So I did.
Did you really?
So there were several other established prototyping houses in Detroit.
Sure.
Heavily funded. There was one that was doing $50 million a year, but they were also the largest Stratasys reseller in the region or in the U.S. at the time.
I'm very familiar with them.
Fisher Unitech?
Yes.
Yeah. So
they've continued to grow.
Yeah. They were purchased by CATI last year or the year before. So I actually knew the founders, Greg Fisher and the other gentleman, Charlie Hess.
Okay.
And they somehow knew about what I was doing through an article or whatever, and they invited me over, and I checked out their facility or whatever, and I brought over some parts, and they showed me like what was on the Stratasys machines. And I'm all too familiar with like the quality and the materials or whatever that those machines can do. And I brought my parts, and the guys were looking at it, they're like, "What machine did you make this out of?" I'm like, the M word, right?
Yeah.
The MakerBot. But the thing is that I completely rebuilt my MakerBot machines. So they were more MikeBots than MakerBots at that point, because all the firmware, the electronics, the only thing that was original on those machines were like the rubber M button and the wooden frame. But even the wooden frame, like I did a special coating and black coating on it that reduced the resonance of it.
Okay.
And I did all new linear rails, all new custom machined aluminum X, Y, and Z brackets and everything. So everything about the machines were custom, and the extruder especially was completely custom, so that I could do high temp materials. And I made a special custom SLS nylon. What is it? Not just for the hot end, but for the extruder.
Okay.
So different gear ratio type stuff. It was all different stuff that I was experimenting with, but ultimately it ended up that in combination with my printing profiles, because I'm just, up until 6 a.m. dialing in a damn benchy or a cube just to get the perfect print.
Sure.
If you know your machine that well, you're able to outperform, $250,000 machines, hands down. Doesn't matter. And I was actually able to do more materials than those Stratasys machines because I wasn't locked to a license or whatever. And I luckily, through my connections in the industry, had there was this manufacturer out in Wisconsin called Coex. I think they're still around. And then 3DX Tech, when they were first starting out, they have awesome stuff. So I was using awesome material with different nozzles and experimentations, and I was legitimately able to service those industries because of the knowledge that I had. And it's all about the skill that the individual brings to the tool in order to get the maximum quality that you can get out of it, or the maximum utility out of it. And in my opinion, Stratasys machines are completely kneecapped. There's probably so much more you can do with those machines, but I totally understand for their application and customers that they have to do that in order to sell the volume that they need and at the consistency and repeatability that they need to be them at. But yeah, I had MakerBots. I even had this is another story I should tell you some other time. The Tier Time Up Mini.
Yes.
PPP 3D, whatever it was called.
Sure.
So I did some ABS, white ABS parts in those machines only. And then I actually purchased a 3D Systems ProJet 1500 DLP machine.
Okay.
And that machine was a nightmare. Is the worst machine I ever owned, worst purchase I ever made. And I just solely relied on the FDM machines, and I did have Formlabs machines too, like the Form 1.
Yeah.
And if I ever needed any metal parts made, if I ever needed anything else, I would rely on just my supply chain, just supplier relations that I had in Detroit. And if I needed big SLS parts, I would use 3DPX, or I would use a connection that I had out in Oregon, or even Shapeways. I used a whole bunch of different suppliers that I knew that I built relationships with that I would overflow work to, but I would still be the primary contractor to a lot of these people.
Gotcha. I love so much about everything you just shared. I love the scrappiness and upgrading your machines and kind of working directly with some of the pioneers at MakerBot on the software side. And I love how transparent and willing to share you are with some of the Stratasys opinions and the 3D Systems project. I love it, and I really appreciate you sharing kind of that raw feedback, of what it's like starting a service bureau, a 3D printing service, in such a demanding manufacturing niche, in some of the earliest days of desktop 3D printing, we'll call it. Such a cool story.
Yeah, you can make anything happen if you're good enough at it, frankly, and if you know how to sell. My value to the people that I was initially serving in Detroit was that I had a unique ability to print in materials that none of the other big guys were able to do. That was one. And two, volume. Since I had so many machines, I practically built them from the ground up. I had other FDM machines too, other than the MakerBots. But the fact that I was intentionally not the cheapest, but I was also intentionally not the most expensive.
Sure.
And I want to stress this for anybody. Obviously, a lot of people are probably going to come to this podcast wondering how to make money with 3D printing, because that's like what we do at MakerOS. Right. But how to make money in a fabrication, design, or engineering business. Don't be the cheapest. For the love of God, stop doing that. Like, for those of you who have been around since the 3D Hubs days, who have been beaten to a pulp about price competitiveness, stop it. Stop doing that. Don't be the cheapest. Why are you the cheapest? Do you feel like you are the cheapest? Like, for some reason, when I see cheap prices, that means to me that those people don't value themselves, right? And if you are as badass as you think you are, as good of an engineer, as good as your machines are, then you price them accordingly to the value that you're providing the customer, not based on the cost that you think that you are incurring, right? So I preach this from the top of every mountain anytime that I get into a consultation with a new client. And this is a common theme, not just for small makers out of their home, but also there was like a $150 million business that I was consulting with out of New England that realized that they were underpricing their big SLA machines by like 55%, because they didn't do like the math correct on like their cost basis, but also, I did a workshop with them of them understanding the value that they're providing. So please, if you're watching this, we have an awesome free pricing calculator, and we've produced a few videos on our YouTube and some webinars on how to properly price and calculate what the total cost of fabrication is, along with some suggestions for value-based pricing. Please go through that exercise. It's going to take you a little bit of time. It's totally worth it. You'll be much happier because you did it, and you'll be much more successful.
I love that piece of advice, and I wish so much that you had been in my ear when I was in school running printers out of my apartment, because I was absolutely the cheapest. I was dirt cheap, earning beer money and loving every minute of it. But in hindsight, being the absolute lowest cost person within a 2-hour radius was not a good business move.
let's face it, because what we're doing is not commoditized. Like, there's, you get these big print bureaus with 50 machines or 200 machines, and they're pricing, less than like a couple dollars an hour on those machines.
Right.
Unless they are producing the same thing over and over, and it is a commoditized part, then that's appropriate to price that for that particular project. But if you maintain that same pricing scheme for everything that you're doing, you're going to be missing out on so much, and you're going to be causing yourself more headache than what's necessary. So I have lots of opinions on that, but I like to guide people and to show them what their true value is, right? Because what we are doing with additive or CNC laser cutting work that is custom for somebody else, it's not only paying for the time and materials of running that, it's the value of the part of the application that that client is intending to do, but it's also everything beyond the part itself. It's the interaction between, let's say if you were the client, it's the interaction between you and me. Am I friendly? Right. Are we actually finding out the true thing that you actually need, and am I delivering on it? Is it the customer experience on my website? Am I communicating with you well? Are you and I creating something more than just a singular part? Is there a design project to this? Is this part of a big assembly? So in dealing with a client, you have to be very consultative, in my opinion, in order to get not just more out of the project or more out of the client, but it's about maintaining that relationship for repeat business, for higher value jobs, for higher margins.
Yep, absolutely. I think I know we're coming close to our timeline here. I don't think we've actually addressed what is MakerOS.
MakerOS is everything that I've just been talking about put into software. It's all the blood, sweat, and tears. It's all the hardships of starting a business from the ground up. I know very intimately what the vast majority of your viewers are going to be going through when starting a business, all the way from finding the right material, tuning your machines, dealing with shitty clients, dealing with just capital crunch if they're thinking about quitting their job to start something. All of those scary things and all of those things that you don't want to deal with is, in essence, what MakerOS helps you to get over and helps you to manage all of that. So if I am to describe in one sentence of what MakerOS is as an analogy, MakerOS is if Salesforce, Trello, Autodesk, QuickBooks all had a baby.
Okay.
That's MakerOS all in one. So you are essentially able to run any design, engineering, or small fabrication business by managing all of your client intake, automatic quoting, custom billing and invoicing, along with all the project management and all of the steps in between. So you can build your custom workflow from start of a project, and start of a project can be very subjective, and that could be just a part submission, or that could be, I need you to design this full product and go from the design, prototype, and then production process.
Okay.
So we house all of that in a very easy to use interface that clients could get access to in a client portal, but so that you, as the business and your team, if you have a team, can collaborate with them online and basically get all the specs, get all the information, have them upload all their files, and so that you can build them in one single place. And on the back end, so behind all of that front end interaction with clients and project management, you can have inventory management and all your pricing algorithms with the auto quoter. You can modify all those things. And we have APIs and connections that you can make with a lot of the other softwares that you might use, including Octoprint. You can connect it to Zapier, so you can basically shoot out any other automations to any other place. And we even have, other than our free version, which intentionally we just launched the free version in February, which essentially allows anybody at any skill level, at any budget, to get onto MakerOS and just test it out. And we did that so that we could basically democratize this level of software that's typically only accessible to businesses that can afford to build tens of millions of dollars worth of infrastructure, like a Protolabs, Xometry, 3D Hubs, and so on. Now we're giving that same level of power to literally anybody who has a computer and an internet connection and a machine or a service to offer. But we also have a more premium business offering that gives you a bit more capacity. But we also have an enterprise offering, which is proving to be very successful now, which allows you to essentially spin up a completely separate network of MakerOS.
Okay.
So let's imagine in an education environment, let's say a university licenses a enterprise version of MakerOS. They are able to host that on a completely separate software, server infrastructure, and we're able to host that off of their domain. So you could have, let's say, internal.powerbelt3d.com, which would be like your internal dashboard with your internal projects, but you can also have an external one for clients. But let's say you also have a CNC operation or different locations around the world. You can have all these different instances connected to your individual network. And then that network is just another node as part of the macro network of MakerOS. Okay. And we're going to be doing some pretty cool stuff with that.
That is beyond cool. And as someone who has run small-scale printing services out of an apartment and also run more industrial services with higher-end equipment, mm-hmm. and worked with so many different clients in my past work experience, what you're describing in terms of the client communication, the sales, the billing, mm-hmm. the automatic quote generation, brings so much value. And I'll confess that when I saw that MakerOS was becoming free, I felt a little guilty, because I'm like, crap, I really have no excuse now not to start offering printing services, mm-hmm. of some kind. I still don't know if I'm willing to make that jump, but I love knowing that it's mm-hmm. that it's free and available, kind of when that time comes.
Yeah, it's super easy to get started. I mean, it's free. You get started in just a couple of minutes just to get it up and running. But if you have a Squarespace, Wix, or WordPress site, the integration, we get this question all the time. How do I put it on my website? It's literally just a hyperlink. You literally just put a button on your website that says, get an instant quote, or go to your client portal or log in, and that goes to your individual MakerOS instance. That's custom branded and white labeled to your branding, to your color scheme, and you can customize that entire customer experience. We also do have, the API integrations. We have other ways to do that, but it is the easiest integration you could possibly do on your website. Like if you know how to put a button on your website, then you know how to integrate MakerOS on your website. And then at that point, your only limitation is the time that you have as a business owner in order to fulfill those orders and drive traffic to your site to get those orders and run them through MakerOS. So there is so much opportunity. There are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people that have machines that are even established businesses that either do offer services already, but they might be running that business off of spreadsheets and a contact form on their website. So what we want to do is completely change the game and basically say, here, just nice boxed up package with a bow on top. Here's $10 million worth of software for free. Grow with us. And when you grow, then that helps obviously not just the business itself, that's going to help the network grow, but that also obviously helps, MakerOS, because there's more revenue being generated through the system, and there's more premium offerings that we have. So we want to take there are billions of dollars processed in cloud manufacturing services, in cloud engineering and design services, billions. And it's actually several $1 trillion worth of globally the value of the total addressable market in all this. And not even a fraction of it has been put into cloud workflows or into a system like this yet. It's just starting. And right now what you're seeing is a few very large services eating up decent chunks of that. What happens when you give that same power to several 100,000 individuals in other small businesses, right? What happens then? That is going to have an insane network effect on not only the industry, but in my opinion, the global economy and the accessibility of having products made. And welcome to the roaring 20s, right? So let's make the next 5 years the most productive and innovative that the world has ever seen. And I think that MakerOS can be the infrastructure to allow for a lot of that to happen.
I love that. I think the COVID face shields were such a prime example of how powerful decentralized manufacturing can be for getting things made. And as someone who has processed thousands of parts on a spreadsheet, I can feel that pain deep inside of me, and I'm so happy that there's a solution available for small manufacturers. I've got one final question for you,
Sure.
but before we get there, do you have where can people learn more about MakerOS? Is there a call to action, a next step that you'd like the audience to take?
Go to MakerOS.com and sign up. Use the offer code. Nothing, because there is no offer code. It's just you get it for free. You go there, you sign up, set up the system, test it out. We have some decent tutorials on our support center, along with what a lot of people come to us to is asking the question, how do I price? How do I develop this pricing scheme? So we have a few YouTube videos for you to watch and educate yourself on, along with a free pricing calculator available on our website. So those are some good places to start, but have at it. And we have a lot more coming down the pipes, and I can't wait to have you interact with MakerOS and grow with us. So MakerOS.com.
Awesome. MakerOS.com is the place to be with all those resources that you mentioned. But outside of MakerOS, what's one thing you're really excited about in the world of 3D printing, whether it's a trend, a technology, or something you want to see more of?
Design for additive software.
Okay.
One company in particular that comes to mind, and I love their stuff. Their social is great, just because their parts are so nice that come out of it. It's an Entopology. Yeah, they're awesome. The team is awesome. The founder is awesome. I know a few people that work there, and that software is going to unlock something different, especially in metal additive, but also even in polymer additive. It's going to change the way that big companies see what they can transform to an additive workflow. And, I think those type of generative, parametric, lattice structure type of manufacturing of parts is going to fundamentally change the made world. And not just, it's going to start smaller, and obviously it has already in additive progressively getting more popular. But once those parts become standardized and validated in larger companies, they will see the value and transform their entire inventory of parts, maybe not their entire, but large chunks, into that design thinking methodology and apply that across possibly their entire product lines, which will have a downstream effect at the large OEM level, downstream effect to a lot of the other smaller suppliers and a lot of the other smaller companies, and truly start the additive revolution within the next 5 years. So we have started it. We have proved that it's an applicable technology, as you said, with not just COVID, but over the last 10 years of it being a mainstay as a tool, part of the manufacturing, design, and engineering workflow. And there will be new technologies, too, completely unrelated to additive manufacturing, that are just as complementary, similar to, super advanced, metal CNC machines, micro CNC machines are going to be a really big thing coming to, like Bantam tools and stuff like that. So some very interesting stuff, and it's an amazing time to be alive to see all this happening in real time.
I was just thinking the same time. It's so cool that both you and I have the opportunity to be plugged into this industry, and in our lifetimes we'll be able to watch this transformation unfold, because the ability of computers to take and subsidize human knowledge to create structures that we would never be able to make with typical parametric CAD software.
Right.
Lost my train of thought.
It's just so cool. It's magic, right? Like, the reason why you and I are still so excited about this is because we see the potential, and the potential hasn't, what is reality hasn't reached there yet. But there's always going to be more that you can do with this technology, and just not just the tech, but business models. And what we're after is large network effects of manufacturing, design, and engineering. A company is coming together to create the largest ecosystem in the world for that type of stuff, but also bringing accessibility to the rest of the world, but there is so much to be done and so many more ideas that we haven't even thought of that this technology is going to be able to unlock. And it to me is the most exciting thing to be working on in the world, because it literally will enable so many other industries to progress. And I love it.
I couldn't agree more. As embarrassed as I feel right now, what I think we all just saw was my brain breaking thinking about this incredible future where digital manufacturing has this explosive, innovative effect amongst so many different industries, whether it's medicine or aerospace, and kind of the bright future that we can live in when this technology becomes embraced and more widespread. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your story with me and with the rest of the audience. Until next time.
Absolutely. Can't wait.
Thanks, Mike.
Cheers. See you guys.
Thank you so much for tuning in to listen to my chat with Mike Moceri from MakerOS. If you have ever thought about starting a 3D printing service at any scale, I hope you'll take him up on his offer and go to MakerOS.com to check out their free auto quotation and customer interaction software. While you're still here, why not take 1 second to subscribe to 3D Print Authority? It's totally free, and that way you won't miss any new episodes when they come out. Until next time, happy printing.